podcast in the background as we listen to the power hour of 30 minutes of just silence, of us just staring at each other, desperately counting down from
Don't
30
go breaking
minutes.
my heart.
Da, 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 da.
I wouldn't if I could.
Da, 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 da,
Try, could. Which one is it? I don't know.
I couldn't. If
Could
I
it?
tried.
I couldn't if I tried. It was one of those. I knew it was one of those. Sweet.
If I tried.
Tried, could, whatever.
Would, should, potato,
Sweet.
potato.
Potato. Feels a lot like what we're going to talk about today, doesn't it?
Welcome to this is the Sean Connery episode.
Selesnya.
Selesnya.
You must never hesitate.
You must never hesitate.
But I drive a Volvo.
Put on those counters, Miss Moneypenny. Destroy that artifact.
It's funny, the British guy can't do a British accent. That's fantastic. I love it. So, we are here with Ubercube, live and recorded, whichever one happened first, who knows, chicken and egg. But we are going to talk about saving Selesnya and what's so special about the most exciting pairing in Magic's history.
You're not fooling anybody
But it can
by
be fun.
saying it.
It can be fun. I do like it. I think it has a little bit of negative connotation attached to it.
To quote one of my favorite movies, convince me.
I think some people call it like snoring, boring. But you know what? Maybe they just haven't had this episode to have a little bit of a Selesnya appreciation day, right, May?
Mm-hmm.
We're here to talk all about fun things you can do in Selesnya, and we have some community responses we're going to talk about today on Ubercube about what Selesnya cards, specifically if you're not familiar, white and green cards that you can put in your cube that are in fact exciting. And we probably will branch off from there, but I had an experience recently while playing Cube that made me think, you know what? This little grouping, this little pair, this little duo isn't so bad. But before we go any further, we're going to talk about the drinks we are having during this particular episode. And let's start out with the lovely May. What are you having on this delightful Friday?
So I have been holding on to this explicitly for us to record. I got a Cutwater White Russian in a can, where the White Russian Cutwater vodka and coffee cream liqueur.
It sounds
I enjoyed
incredible.
it. It's not really a summer drink, but like I like White Russians. So
I do too, actually.
I do too.
I like White Russians and I like Grasshoppers. That's the one with the creme de menthe.
Oh, I love grasshoppers.
I know, right? But they're so like it's like a one and done type of beverage. I'm like, oh, I feel like I drink a milkshake.
All right, what you got?
All right, I am gonna have a hazy little thing by Sierra Nevada. It's funny before you answer, I was in this really cool little group on the MTG Talk Discord, and we were talking about brewing recently. And one of the things that I actually want to pick up again this weekend once I get all my home repairs done.
It's been a while.
I haven't brewed in a while.
It's been a while.
And I like to make a Selesnya clone, I said a Selesnya clone, but I'm going to leave that. A Sierra Nevada clone that's kind of jalapeno, sometimes raspberry inspired, which can be really difficult based on the type of, I think it's Cetra hops. Can't think of it all of a sudden, but the type of hops that are a little bit overbearing, a little bitter. I can look it up post, but it sounds kind of like what I said, Selesnya hops.
I liked it so much the last time you brewed it that I actually drank the one that had all the sediment.
Yeah, I worked that situation out too. They required filtration. Yeah, because all that hop settles. Some of it gets through on the secondary. But
all right, well, crank them.
Let's crank them, and we're going to talk about everybody's favorite Selesnya. Welcome to the stage.
All right, so apparently, well, let me first ask this question, right? You said Selesnya. Are we specifically talking about Selesnya-only cards, or are we talking about some combination of green, white, and green, and white cards that fit into archetypes that are associated with the Selesnya color pair?
I think we had this conversation just recently, actually, May, where we talked about something similar. Something similar.
Solemn simulacrum?
Solemn simulacrum. Something similar whenever we were we were talking about Simic. There's a lot of words here. But when we were just chatting about it, it did kind of branch off into the blue and green in that case, right? So we are going to focus on a lot of the individual signpost cards. But yeah, if you want to just break off and say this supports Selesnya at its, I guess, granularity, sure, rock on with your bad self. That's my opinion on that matter.
I asked that question because I look at some of the very powerful cards that have come out recently that kind of fit in the Selesnya, but because they've been printed in only one of those colors, then maybe the the way that Selesnya has in the past separated itself or defined itself, certainly in a lot of cubes that I've played, that maybe now some of that identity from Selesnya specifically has kind of been stolen a little bit, right? So think about over the last few years, there's been some amount of color pie breakage, right?
Sure.
There's been an acceptance that, okay, we want some amount of card draw in other colors than blue, and we want counter magic in other colors than blue. Not just that blue is the greatest color, which it obviously is. But I'll start you out with a card that I think is kind of an exemplary in one manner for Selesnya, but is mono white, and that's Jackrabbit.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
Incredibly powerful card.
Why might that be?
Because it creates tokens.
And what else?
It gets bigger.
There you go. It does all the scales. And
it comes in with +1/+1 counters.
And rabbits eat green things. That was what you're going with mostly, right? That
I don't
rabbits
usually
eat green things.
associate
I
the
just
green
assumed
in Magic with lettuce specifically, but I'm willing to
I thought
concede
maybe
to
that's
that.
where you went with
I'm
that.
conceding to that for the rest of this episode. Green is going to represent lettuce. White, I'm not sure yet, but green is the lettuce.
White Russians.
Eat your salads.
Eat your salads. May, we're going to kind of trail off here a little bit, but I think as we were just kind of going back and forth here, I realized we're talking a lot, but you're actually really the Selesnya expert in this group. As in, you have in fact tested the thresholds outside of what we normally expect. Like, sure, Stu and I, we look at Powered Vintage Cube and we play Peasant Cubes, and it all falls within the trappings of that. But for someone that actually knows this grouping, I think it's you, actually.
Sure. I don't blame you for that assumption. I am definitely a person who tends to troubleshoot a little bit more. I don't want to say aggressively, but I would say intentionally on Selesnya, because I feel like Selesnya kind of represents a few different categories beyond just, yes, this is +1/+1 counters, and this is just, it's not just tokens and +1/+1 counters. So like before, how we mentioned with like Simic, right? Where when we think of, what are the things that blue do? Well, blue do draw cards. That's how the blue do. The blue do draw cards, right? But you also get the additional ramping whatnot because of the green. But you don't really get that with Selesnya. Selesnya actually has like a pretty solid identity because where green and white overlap is with strong creatures. And it's not to say that they are particularly stompy creatures. That's definitely more of like Gruul's territory or Golgari's territory, right? But it's to say that how white and green interact is that you have white's kind of, let's say, lower curve and significantly more prominent like Staxy types effects or effects that scale with the game and whatnot. And that's something that green typically doesn't get a lot of, because the majority of the time that you're like within stompy for green, then it's like, yes, I'm trying to get into the cheaper cheaper stompier creatures. Like think the classic, I'm gonna just one mana dork into Leatherback Baloth as the classic play pattern for that kind of stomp, right? Very, very retro, right? Ding 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 ding. But
Congratulations.
Once you get into Selesnya, we start getting into that nice little sweet spot where it's just like, yes, I have all these aggressive white cards that come out early, and then I have all these stompy green cards, and then the signpost cards are usually somewhere in between that like puts pressure like really adamantly on like control players and whatnot.
Doesn't that kind of make it sound to me like, why isn't Selesnya just by far the most powerful color pair in any format where the card colors are balanced? Because you've got this combination of the incredible removal, right? You've got the greatest single removal spell in the game in Swords to Plowshares, and Path to Exile not a million miles behind it. You've got great hate bear kind of cards, and then you've got these lower costed, high power, high toughness cards. How do you beat that? Like, there's no way any deck should be able to beat that.
Well, that's
right?
a good follow-up. What is the hang-up? Like, I will be completely honest. There are times where I actively avoided drafting this subset of cards. And I want to try to understand, before we proceed, what do you think is the overarching reason why it does? A lot of people say, I've heard it, this is boring. And I may have said that before too. Is it because it's so reliable?
No, I think stating that it's boring, to me, that's a lazy cube problem. If that, maybe that's a bit of a bold statement, because I've drafted green in, like, I'm trying to remember which cube it was. It was one of your cubes, Anthony, and I drafted that +1/+1 counters, hardened scales.
That was my artifact cube.
I think it was the artifact
definitely.
cube, right? That deck was extremely fun. Lots and lots going on. It had the one where you can remove 50 counters and win the game or deal 50 damage, whatever that card is. So that was fun. It combined not necessarily the aggressive nature that green is kind of known for at a base level, and I wasn't relying on the ultra efficient removal that white is necessarily known for, but it did have some of those defining characteristics of green in the powerful creatures and the white of some amount of removal, green with the counters, white with also the counters and some utility thrown in. But it was a fun deck because it wasn't just put +1/+1 counters on creatures and turn them sideways and hope that mine are bigger. And oh, by the way, I can also spend 1 mana and remove whatever creature is put on the battlefield.
Is that an element of card quality, or is that more of an element of just green and white? What I mean is, can it just be green and white in the coexistence of Selesnya, or are you referring to a curated subset of specialty chosen cards that created your experience?
I think
that's a curated experience.
I agree. I think it was, and obviously those cards went together. I don't believe that you, as with all the experience that you have as a cube curator, would do that unintentionally, right? Am I wrong in saying that?
Well,
that those were accidental?
You're not wrong.
Okay.
I'll bounce this towards May before we even go any further. Selesnya Wolves, tell us about that. There's a reason why I'm mentioning that, because it requires I think generically green and white struggle to be fun for me at times. I mean, as individuals, for different reasons. And you put them together, I think I'm of the opinion, if they're just flat, I'm not having the greatest time in the world. But if I think you take something like Selesnya Wolves, then you've made fetch happen. You've made fun happen for me. Now I'm into it. Now I'm getting this now. Mm-hmm. It required the curation point, not just a subset of Selesnya cards. May, where do you land on that statement? Or a long list of statements?
Well, multi-part statements, questions, whatnot. I feel like maybe the controversial statement, since we're just going to lay out our takes and hope for the best, I personally feel that Selesnya is really good at doing the fair thing better than other brackets, because either you're leaning into, like I mentioned kind of offhandedly, you're doing a kind of Staxy thing of being like, no, we are playing fair magic. You are having to play fair magic. Or on the other extent of, my stuff either is going to outscale you or just come out right out the gate being out like bigger statted than you. And like Stu alluded to, a lot of my interaction is cheap. A lot of my removal options are cheap. White and green can answer most permanents, right? White's real good at dealing with creatures, just because, our classic exile package. You have green that's real good at dealing with enchantments and artifacts. You have this kind of utility, but kind of the part that we overlooked was the fact that they also both have a life gain overlap. And that's huge when we're trying to talk about, like, we have like a bunch of aggro decks that are trying to push out as much damage as you can, and you just gain 3 life. I just wasted an entire card bolting your face, and you just gain 3 life basically for free. This is wonderful. I'm having a great time, right? And that's kind of what I mean of, like, Selesnya's doing a fair, quote-unquote, thing better than the other combinations tend to do for a lot of cubes. But because it's trying to very innately being like, I'm doing the fair, I'm turning sideways, playing my creatures, and maybe gaining some life so that way I'm not losing tempo, right? Sometimes that's enough to get there. Other times it's just innately boring.
That's kind of what
innately boring because the way that it interacts isn't particularly accelerating the game. It's just I have a card that's just kind of worth more than yours.
Go wide,
not monetarily speaking,
go
but in
tall.
terms of like gameplay.
I mean, that's probably the hang up here, right? I think you hit the nail on the head. It is the most fair, but also the best at being fair. I wouldn't even have thought of that, but I think it's fantastic. But maybe that's the trouble with it. I guess it depends on where you've entered the game and what your intent is, or the draft, right? We don't even have to like break it down. We can go micro here. And it's sometimes like I've told this before, like Boros aggro isn't always interesting to me, but Boros has also been getting cards that are more interesting over time. And so if there's a curated suite of cards, you can bolster it up and make it more interesting, which kind of segues into this card I want to talk about. I have a new opinion of a card that I think is Anthony's personal favorite Selesnya card. And I have a lot of reasons for this, and I don't know if I can articulate that very well, but I will try. So it is Arwen, the Mortal Queen, for 1 colorless, and Selesnya, which is green and white. Legendary creature, Elf Noble 2/2. Arwen, Mortal Queen, enters the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it. Pay 1, remove an indestructible counter from Arwen. Another target creature gains indestructible until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter and a lifelink counter on that creature, and a +1/+1 counter and a lifelink counter on Arwen. The reason why, back to what you said about the best at being fair, I actually run this card, and I know Samet's just added as well, to my Powered Vintage Cube. It's hard sometimes for these colors to compete with all the combos that are exploding off and Tinkerer, and not that this even's ever going to compete with that, right? I mean, even at the speed of Kiki Twin, this might struggle. But this also inherently allows players who want to play this type of game. And this type of game can be played very smartly and challenge those decks. While it's not going to go off as... It's funny how something like this can sit in there with Time Vault and what's the other one? Voltaic Key.
Yep.
And to put
Manifold
this...
Key.
And then you talk about that, and then you shove this card next to it.
Well, they're not going to be... they don't belong in the same cube.
But they do. And I'll tell you why.
You believe so?
No, I 100% believe so. And
Okay.
I certify, well, that in fact, Arwen the Mortal Queen gave me so much game against a deck that was cheating out mana, far superior, playing unfair. And this card allowed me to stabilize because of the life game factor. I got my teeth kicked in by unfair stuff that was happening. No combos had went off, but the creature quality, the card quality, coming at me from our good friend Thomas at the time, and he too won me. He ultimately won, but he struggled to beat this card in a ground-to-ground type of match, creature versus creature. This was an amazing stabilization card, whereas it doesn't look like, when I go back to what I said, yeah, it's not going to beat the instant combo, 2 parts, A plus B.
No.
It's just not, but most things don't. You have to go into the blue at that point. But from a ground strategy with the entry point of so many ETB, LTB type cards, and creatures ultimately turning sideways, I don't care what you call it. You can pick anything. Say a Solitude or a Rex Sage or Fury or whatever you got, right? I mean, whatever. When you start taking a card like this and you start facing up against it, you can potentially stabilize. And I know those aren't the best examples. I'm just saying it allows you the versatility of getting back in the game, which it did. And it made the games a lot more dynamic for a creature versus a unfair deck. Back to May's point. It was the most fair of the fair decks.
What I really like about this card is that it is a compact way of doing 3 different things that we see a lot in kind of, I don't want to say draft chaff, but a lot in limited that tends to be enough to get extra pressure on the board. So you have one is it's an indestructible 2/2, right? And that's enough that you can kind of like do I almost want to say a sort of boggle thing with it, where it's just like, this is hard to remove. If I buff this up at any point, I could just leave that indestructible counter on there and then not feel bad about whatever just gets equipped to it or like enchanted onto it or whatever, right? But it also fulfills some different roles by doing that. Yes, I'm also going to turn this other creature into an indestructible, give it a +1/+1 counter and a lifelink counter. And what I mentioned earlier with the lifelink, where it's just like, yes, now I'm getting some extra life back, which makes it so that I can outpace you. So that way you can't just, yes, you're going to slowly go to face. That's fine. I'm gaining like 3 life every turn.
That's my point.
And at least for this turn, I'm swinging with something indestructible with lifelink.
And I can see this through Stu's lens, where he's thinking like blue magic versus this, right? And that's problematic when you start doing that. What's interesting is this card's indiscriminate about where it puts these counters, where these indestructible. And then the fact that we're in white and green, back to what we originally said, we've got mass board wipes. We have all these things that we can capitalize on with this card. And it's not exclusive to like Powered Vintage or Legacy. This card is this is a small commercial break, is in the Fem Cube, which was recently selected for CubeCon 2025 by Birds of Paradise.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, and thank you very much.
Nice.
Thank you very much, Birds of Paradise, for once
Absolutely.
again selecting, and CubeCon for supporting that project. We'll talk about that in a future episode. But this card, it looks innocuous. There's a lot going on with this card that I assure you, Stu, that it can be uncomfortable to face down even with the best deck. Back to May's point. It is a very fair deck versus your broken deck. This can get me back in the game. It may be very late, but it does it.
It can. Okay.
It can, and it does.
Not disputing that this can provide game. The statement about you're probably not going to see this card in a time voltaic key, manifold key kind of cube is because typically those kind of cards are in cubes where you want the most amount of completely busted combos, and this generally isn't a combo-y card in the vein of that, right? Like Splinter Twins and
it's in there,
Through
though.
the Breaches and stuff like that.
It coexists in there. We're going to have other people from the community that are going to actually back this card up.
I don't dislike it. I want to state that. I'm not saying that this card is bad. It's not a bad card. I feel like it's a little slow. It's again, it's 3 mana for a 2/2 indestructible. That's cool. Okay, that's good. I mean, fairish value, I guess. You do, in my opinion, need to pay the 1 to really get enough value out of it to make it worthwhile. And that activated ability is no slouch, right? It only costs 1. You don't need to tap Arwen to do it. If you've had any kind of proliferate or ways to get another indestructible counter on it, all of a sudden you can go pretty ham sandwiches. But I think on face value, I think fairness really does speak the volumes. I love that. The mid-range, very fair. That kind of is a defining factor for how I would judge this card.
We would put her, it depends on the context of the environment, but she's almost a supporting character. So we're going to go back to the unfair cube for a minute, which let's just say Primetime's coming at you. I have the ability now to make that into a 7/7 with lifelink, indestructible, which is not fair. And there's and gaining 7 life. You see the problem here? It's a support mechanism that can come in and has game. It just doesn't look like much on paper. If you're thinking of this as a 2/2 and you're playing this early game and you're trying to do that, you can be aggressive, but you can also stabilize. And in my case, this was a stabilization card that was very powerful.
Yeah,
and that's kind of the tie off for that one. But this is my new current.
Is really nice about it?
What's that?
The fact that it's indestructible means that it can be a blocker for that kind of period of the game.
And it was.
You could just constantly have it chump blocking things until you actually get your threat on the board. And then if they try to remove your threat, you just make your threat indestructible.
I chumped for days in that matchup, and it was kind of back to what we said. It was that not really Selesnya, but all the supporting cast of Selesnya green-white deck, and this was the Apex Predator in that deck. This card made the problem for the unfair deck, where it wouldn't look on paper that it would. So now take this card and put it in my Fem, it becomes a lot more powerful, contextually speaking, right? This card suddenly becomes an Apex, and it is in there. It is, in my opinion, a very high pick in that cube, whereas back to what May said, the best of the fair in a Legacy Eternal cube.
Well, and that is, the Fem cube is a fair cube. Like, correct. Overall, it's not just a cube that has fair decks in it that have game. It's all about fairness. Mostly fairness. For the most part.
Yes.
Yeah. So, moving on from Anthony's newest favorite card.
Yes.
Great choice. From the Lord of the Rings set, which had a bunch of really good cards. I like that that's a card that you've highlighted out of this set that isn't just Orcish Bowmasters or the One Ring, right? So that's pretty cool. So, Lauren,
because they're not Selesnya and it's not on topic. I'm not gonna lie,
but it's on Lord. But it's Lord of the Rings. Yeah, but not really on topic. So again, Selesnya, to me, it's because of the amount of times I've had a cube overview showed to me, or I've opened one up and I've looked at it, and then I've looked at the Selesnya thinking, okay, cool. I wonder what kind of fun package Selesnya is going to bring. And what is Selesnya? It's +1/+1 counters. It's some removal for artifacts or enchantments.
Light recursion,
it's tokens.
life gain.
It's a bit, yeah, exactly.
It's kind of the poster child for mid-range.
Mid-range,
sort of.
Kind of samey. You know,
can be.
Like, okay, I've done that a few times. Yeah. And it's like, I do that in one cube. Do I really want to do it in another cube and another cube?
Go wide, go tall.
Exactly.
It can be that.
So we reached out to the community, right? And we said, what is your favorite Selesnya cube card? Why is it your favorite card? Give us some context. Let us know why X card or Y card, why that sticks out to you in a particular cube. And we're going to go through a few of these today so we can give some context on why other people like particular cards within that cube context.
And then maybe it'll inspire you to add this to your particular environment, right? So we're straying all over the place. So we asked the people to kind of define what type of environment we're talking about here. And people are excited actually to give us multiple answers. So I'm going to ask that the lovely May take the first one, please. And you can paraphrase this. You don't have to. We're not going to torture May and make her read all these words. It's a lot, but you can give the gist.
Sure. So the first one's from Jake Spendlove, and what they mentioned as some of their favorites is, to start off, we have Kasali Pride Mage, we have Armadillo Cloak, and then we have Good Fortune Unicorn. Which, to just get them out of the way so that way we can know what we're talking about. First is the Pride Mage. It is a 2-mana 2/2 with Exalted, which just means that if it or another creature attacks alone, it gets +1/+1. However, the important part is that you can spend 1 mana, sacrifice it, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Which, I love 2-drops that let you pay 1, sacrifice, destroy an artifact or enchantment, because it feels like that's like a sideboard card that you aren't going to feel bad in the main deck. It feels like it's always a card. And the reason that they particularly mentioned it is that it holds a bit of aggro. It also does a mid-rangey thing, and like I mentioned before, it is the disenchant on the stick, so that's always really nice. The second one they mentioned, which was the Armadillo Cloak, which is a 1 green and a white for an aura that has enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and it has trample. Whenever this creature deals damage, you gain that much life. This is an important distinction. This is not lifelink. You can put this on your opponent's creature to effectively fog them. Or it doubles with your lifelink. It does gross things. It is an important distinction, which is exactly why they wanted to mention out, because the double lifelink is extremely good and limited. Then lastly was the Unicorn, which makes it a verifiable threat that comes down relatively soon for a lot of low power things, and it gets underrated a lot of time. It gets passed a lot of time, which I definitely agree with. Like a 3-mana 2/2 that whenever another creature enters, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. Anytime that I see that kind of effect, my immediate follow-up question is, what is the dumbest thing that I can do with this? How many tokens can I make with it? How many persist creatures are in this cube to go with it?
Yes.
And yeah, they mostly just pointed out the fact that there's a lot of synergy with the +1/+1 counters themes, which just makes it a solid card if you have like a synergistic package to go with it. So I think all 3 of those are really good picks. And frankly, 2 of those picks were cards I would have wanted to talk about too.
Yeah, I actually would have leaned more towards the Quasali Pride Mage and the Good Fortune Unicorn. Armadillo Cloak, for the longest time, I'm working on doing some lower powered cubes, but I haven't found a home for it as of late. I could see that being in like Christian's Bant's Enchantment Cube if he was going to add it there. But a card out of that subset that just draws my attention, Good Fortune Unicorn just does so much. I mean, I think I can't resist the urge. When I see this card, I'm hoping there's one of 2 things. One, the persist combo. I am dying to see, I don't know, Kitchen Finks that I could actually pair a little cleaner and maybe some kind of sack outlet.
Strangleroot Geist.
I can go nuts.
Come on, let's have some Strangleroot Geist love.
Oh,
here,
yeah. And or, the number 1 card that I'm always seeking out when I see this just for no reason, what is Grum Gully. Something about the idea of having Good Fortune Unicorn and Grub Gully to make a nice Naya deck. Oh my god, I love it so much. That's like one of my favorite things to draft. I think we actually do that in our good friend. He has a Naya kind of cube, and he can pull that off.
That's right.
And so, is Good Fortune Unicorn in the fake cube? We've debated on this a lot over the years.
It is not.
Oh, come on.
So
May.
there was a point before Selesnya Wolves existed, like in the fake cube. There was a point in which I had both Good Fortune Unicorn and what was it called? Lathless? No, not Lathless. There's another unicorn, but I had both of those in there for a bit.
Bring it back.
Yeah, can you Unicorn Tribal? Question mark?
No,
can you make that work?
We already have Selesnya Wolves.
Thank you very much, Jake, for submitting that. I thought that was just some great responses, and we enjoyed that very much, and I agree. Those are great cards. And I think that's kind of exemplifies some of the reasons why people actually inherently, secretly love Selesnya, but they don't go around bragging about it. No one's running through the streets going, I love Selesnya. They're not doing Stella. No one's doing that with Selesnya. They're not doing that. But let's move over to Chris Ireland, who was another submission. Stu, you want to take that one on and talk about it?
Sure. All right. So Chris has mentioned that his cubes are nostalgic and evocative brews, as he's played the game for a long time, likes to bring back older Magic memories. And Selesnya for Chris looks like Mirari's Wake and Anorid Brushhopper in their pre-modern cube. Fewer cards more iconic than Mirari's Wake is Chris's perspective. And I will say, I really love cards that have this persistent, anxious effect, right? Either because they're affecting all creatures or they're making a lot of mana. Like, I put that down and then I'm just sitting there and I've got my... What am I going to do when I untap? Cards like that, just great tension pieces, so I love things like that. And he mentions like ramp and tokens and doublers for things like Palicron combo. Brushhopper apparently doesn't get a whole lot of love.
I had to look that card up. I had no idea what that was. Go ahead and read that card. It was so weird.
Would you like to know what it is? All right. So,
because I want you to, when you're done reading it, I'm going to ask you a question about it. So read this card, then I'll tell you what it is.
Okay.
It's been errata.
So first of all, Anorid Brushhopper, 1 colorless, green-white for a creature beast. And the art, I'm just going to put it right out there. It looks like the thing in Moana, right, with all the jewels and something all over that Jermaine Clement does the voice for. Shout out, I'm a big fan. So creature beast, 3/4 for 3. Okay, nice rate.
Yeah.
Discard 2 cards from your hand. Remove Anorid Brushhopper from the game. Return it to play under its owner's control at end of turn.
Such a weird card. And it is now a frog beast in the art. Because I looked at this thing, I'm like, oh my god, what is that, like a toad or something? This one's the one, like, we're going to talk about a lot of cards that may spark some familiarity. This is the one I'm like, I don't know what the hell this is. I had to go in Scryfall and read about it.
And just for the record, Mirari's Wake is an enchantment. It's 3 colorless, green-white. Creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. Not could produce. Produced.
So circa, see, I wish our good friend Chill says he actually keeps, like, I don't know, tournament logs and major change logs and all these, like, major iteration logs of his cube. There was a point where I know that I ran Mirari's Wake and my powered vintage cube.
Yeah.
And I believe Chris did as well. And it's so wild now that it's 5. It's interesting how these cards kind of, it's a 5 mana win moreish, but in the right environment, when you're fighting against Anorid Brushhoppers, this card is suddenly a banger. But it's so wild to see Mirari's Wake again. It just brings back really good memories, fond memories. I love that card very much.
Yeah, like I say, cards like that I think are great tension pieces. Actually, I was watching, as I do, consume a fair amount of cube content, and I know Caleb Gannon was playing the Vintage Cube, and I think, I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty confident that there was a time not too long ago when Mana Flare was actually removed from the Modo Vintage Cube, and it was much to Caleb's chagrin that card wasn't there, because again, it's a card that is extremely powerful in Storm lists, which is obviously, you know, guys like that are much better at Magic than I will ever be. It represents a great piece for being able to enable cards or being able to enable archetypes like that. But yeah, it's 5 mana. And it kind of does 2 things that don't really align great unless the deck is really built around it. I know that some people are going to be like, that's stupid. You can always make use of mana, and it's always nice to have bigger creatures. Yeah, but I generally tend to find myself more just wanting one or the other. And if I'm going very aggro with the creatures, I don't really want to spend 5 mana just to give them +1/+1. So I think it's an iconic card, and I love it. But I do feel like
Anthem plus weird
Anthem
ramp.
plus the ramp.
It's interesting.
It is.
It would be interesting if they
great commander card. Let's put that.
That would be fun as hell as a commander card, and still can be. And
it was in the cat.
That makes sense.
And I remember looking at it thinking, man, this card is really bright. And it was really expensive for a while. It was like a $20-something card, not so much anymore.
Right.
So Chris Chris also mentions Kitchen Finks and also Knight of the Reliquary in his 2013 cube list, as strongly symbolizing a time in Magic where he was the most invested. Kitchen Finks, again, going back to that, how many times do you want creatures to be entering the battlefield, has the Great Persist combination. Knight of the Reliquary as a multi sort of purpose card, fantastic card.
I still run her in my Power Vintage Cube because I am one of those naysayers. I support a Lands Matters package.
Yeah.
I still love this card because I want to do the Merit Lage stuff. This is the type of Magic I want to play. I love this card. I think it's fun. And then also I run her, if I'm not mistaken, in the Fem as well too. It's just such a versatile card. It's so fun. It lets you do card selection with your lands and whatnot. I dig it. I dig it. And if you're running kind of like Crucible type deal or whatever, Knight of the Reliquary is still has game. Again, going back to when we talked about Arwen, when we face off, if we're going to go to the highest level of Magic, let's step back for a minute. We go to the highest level of Magic, and you put these conversations side by side. If you try to do combo-rific cubes or whatever, these type of cards still can have game as a supporting fixture, not as the apex predator of the deck, right? That was back to when I made the analogy of, I know Primetime wouldn't be the apex predator, but supported by something like an Arwen or the Titan of Industry, supported by an Arwen. That's where these type cards get neat. Knight of the Reliquary still has game as a supporting cast, and that's why Selesnya sometimes falls in these weird things when you have these in-between cards. They're not go wide, they're not go tall, they have these unique identities. They're supporting cast, and it does a great role at that, in my opinion. May, do you agree with that statement? Or multiple statements? Again, I like to layer this stuff into 15 statements for May.
You build a sandwich, and then you just like layer on like some pickles, and then some tomatoes, and then some mayonnaise, and then like you start adding on your traditional like turkey and maybe some Swiss, and then you're like, "Hey May, how do you feel about the bread?"
And smoked
and the rest
Gouda.
of the sandwich. But yeah, I feel like that you've kind of captured a lot of what the poster was kind of putting forward, where I feel like a lot of these cards really capture a lot of that. I don't want to say strong Magic, but kind of classic. It's back to that point that I was saying before of, hey, these are doing the fair thing, but doing the fair thing in the best way.
Powerful,
right?
fair Magic. I think that's the best way. We're going to rename this episode "Powerful Fair Magic" by Selesnya.
And I know that the card, one of my a card that I thought was completely busted back in the day in Primetime. I know Primetime's kind of fell out of favor maybe a little bit in vintage environments. To me, I still think it's really, really strong, and I love the effect that it has. I love that it's just a fun card, and I think cards like that compare with those cards, if you're looking for that kind of back in my day kind of strategies and cubes like that, I mean, what's not to love about ramping and putting out prime times and swinging and getting lands? Like, that is fun, and I love that there's that mentality, because that's something that to me is just so cube centric.
Yeah, supporting cast. They won't get like best actor. They'll get best supporting actor in a lot of cases. But that's okay.
You know what?
Like, I would brag about, you know what? I got best supporting actor in the movie Selesnya. The Academy. They got me a star. Yeah.
That Oscar is still the same. You still get the same little gold.
That's where you land at. Yeah. You go to the party. Just nobody knows who you are. You have to introduce yourself.
That's right. All right. Moving on.
Anthony, how about you take us to our next one?
Yeah, this one is our friend Ian Braverman, and the host of Cube Reviews. And if you haven't listened to the show, Cube Reviews, I always mess this up every time. Ian, you did this. You made this word hard to read, but I love your show. And for those that aren't familiar with that show, Ian invites curators on board. I was on there. I know that the cast of Lucky Paper Radio was on there. He tries to bring people in from the community to talk about their cubes, does a pack one, pick one. It's just all about the vibes type of
great content.
It's great. He has such a great like radio voice too. I love listening to. It's kind of I think it releases on Wednesdays, if I'm not mistaken. That's typically when I download it. But while I'm on airplanes, this is what I listen to. So this is a huge plug for Cube Reviews if you're looking for more content. So Ian Braverman, some of my favorite Selesnya cards in my cubes. And I like these in particular. It's the Renegade Rallier in my Trinket Cube, which I'll come back to in a minute, and I'll share in the show notes. I have a copy of this cube, which is really sweet. And then another one that Ian speaks about is Bright Glass Gearhulk. And I want to talk about these two cards for different reasons. These appeal to me as an artifact or an artificer curator here, in fact, with Uber Bear's Artifact Cube. And I want to swing over to the Bright Glass just for a minute, and I'm going to read this card. This new cycle of Gearhulks that came out during, what was this?
It was Aether Drift.
It was the Death Race set. I was so excited about these. I couldn't make them work in my environments because I'd almost have to tailor my environments to make these work. But when you're looking at like the Trinket Cube, Bright Glass Gearhulk, it would basically be double Selesnya for all intents and purposes. Green, white, artifact creature, construct, 4/4, first strike, trample. That's all good. But what's really neat is when this creature enters, you may search your library for up to 2 artifact, creature, and or enchantment cards with mana value 1 or less, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. I mean, this has got game. This card has game. It has hurdles you must jump through. With I like that pip cost. You're a person that loves pips.
I've been saying this for a long time.
Make the pips great again.
Pips great. Yeah, because I feel like generic mana is just... It's too easy for the good stuff, and I don't really want to start going back into the discussions that we've had in the past about too much fixing enables those 4 and 5 color good stuff decks, because I still feel that the way to combat too much good stuff decks, if that is a goal of your cube, is to increase the number of colored pips within the cards that you choose to place in that cube. And this, to me, agree 100%. This is fun. It's a great card to build around. I actually think as good as a cube card as this is, I actually think it's a bonkers constructed card.
It is.
But I love it.
It's also a bonkers card.
The art is absolutely...
It gets that soul ring, baby. I actually had a hard time getting targets with this card. When I looked, I have to almost play it for its base stat.
Wrong?
I know, and it's a construct. Like, the temptation is real. I almost just put all the Gearhulks in there. I almost just did YOLO and just did them all. And I may eventually, once they wind down in price, I'm excited about these. And I want them in that artifact environment. I want to come back to it. Because right now, you don't get a whole lot. You get some Mishra's Baubles and those type things. And you get the...
I love the fact that you just glossed over Mishra's Bauble.
Yeah.
That it's not just an absolutely...
It's so good. But
incredibly
I know,
powerful
but you
card.
had to... It's a lot of hurdles to jump through for less payoff in my environment. But if your environment's tailored to grab those cards, then this is sick.
Yeah, but I feel like that's not a great example because Mishra's Bauble is such a powerful card that, yes, okay, you could make the argument that really any deck could use it, and it's not like a card that you can target for an individual card such as this.
Sure.
But there's a lot of... And I will say this, artifacts and creature, maybe. It's the fact that you can get enchantments with it as well as the creatures and artifacts that makes this
Rancor.
so bonkers. No, not it. Just
You get
period.
Majority of
Everything.
consoles, you literally grab like a bauble, a console, draw a card. Your opponents now can only play 1 spell a turn, and their creatures enter tapped.
Don't get me wrong.
huge.
I love this card. I just can't make it work yet. But I've seen it work in
Because you're
multiple
wrong.
cubes.
This is a
Because
you
I
problem.
know I have to
It's a you
like build,
problem. Get
I
good.
have to make it better. And the next card is Renegade Rallier. For 1 colorless and Selesnya, you get a creature, human, warrior, 3/2. Revolt. When Renegade Rallier enters the battlefield, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, return target permanent card with mana value 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. So this works with Blink, unlike, say, Morbid, which is pretty neat, actually. So you could do like a Bant Blink type of thing. It's an aggro card. It has a lot of game, too. So this is a great card.
It's actually a bit of a color by break.
Yeah, it is interesting. I like this card a lot.
Same. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian, for sending these in.
Those are great. All the choices have been such great choices. All right, last couple we're going to get through here. Francesco Ner, Gnerre, and Francesco, I don't need to spell. If I butchered your name, my apologies. Francesco has a Pioneer Plus Plus cube, which is the Pioneer ban list, bonus sheets, masterpieces, and directly related products. Focuses on +1/+1 counters, since 3 of the 6 times that they drafted the cube ended up banned +1/+1. Just happens to be how the cookie crumbles. Botanical Brawler
I had to look this card up too, and it's sick.
This is another one. This is green-white for a 0/0 trample. Enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it, and whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on another permanent you control, if it's the first time +1/+1 counters have been put on that permanent this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Botanical Brawler. A lot of text on that card.
Goes off with hardened scales.
Goes absolutely
bananas,
ham.
right?
Yeah, anything, the blink packages where things come in with counters, again, with anything that can support that, this card can go ham. And the fact that it has trample on it, I think that's fantastic. Knight of Autumn doesn't really need much,
talk about
doesn't
it.
need much
in
of an
the Fem
introduction.
Cube, which is again going to be at CubeCon 2025. Love this art. Love the versatility of this card, and it's in Uber Bear's Artifact Cube, which I have almost cut this card like 10 times because I really kind of want to get more towards artifact centric, not artifact hate, but I want artifacts. I really need some artifacts that hate artifacts. That's my next go-to.
I think the fact that it does that for 3 mana, you've got that.
It's so good.
The modal almost ability of either making it big, right? A 4/3 for 3 is okay, or you get that life gain, which is fine. But lastly, I want to talk about Dramoka's command. This is a part of the command cycle. There's been a bunch of these. And I actually think this is a really fun one. So it's an instant for green-white, choose 2. Either prevent all damage target instant or sorcery spell would deal this turn. Target player sacrifices an enchantment. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or target creature fights target creature you don't control. Or target creature...
One of those words.
Or prey.
It does
prey
things.
Upon.
It does things.
Or prey upon.
It basically says things and stuff on the card.
It says things and stuff. Anything. This has been a long-standing sort of theme that we've talked about. Cards, especially cheap cards, 2-mana interactive cards that have these kind of multimodal ability to either be swingy one way or the other. Again, great choice.
So let's talk about the real Magic card now. Our good friend Shoop, who we want to go ahead and congratulate real quick, because another CubeCon featured cube is going to be the Absolute Junk Cube, if I'm not mistaken, by our good friend Shoop. Yeah, congratulations, Shoop.
Congrats.
If I screwed up the name of the cube, doesn't matter. Sick cube. And he picked out Captured by the Captured by the Laylax. Lagax? I don't even know how to say that.
Lagax.
Gax. Oh, this card is so amazing. So for 1 colorless in Selesnya, you get an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature can't attack or block. So you got a pacifism type effect. And then when Capture the Lagax enters the battlefield, support 2, which is put 2/1 counters on each of up to 2 target creatures. The distribution of counters. This card is amazing. It's right there with Arwen as far as one of my favorite Selesnya cards.
Getting 4 power and toughness
and then
across
lock
2
down their creature at the same time.
Locking down a creature is pretty dang strong.
And getting eaten by a giant lizard.
What are with these
butterfly wings or whatever's going on?
Amphibious,
it's so weird. I love it. Yeah. It's such a
Celestia.
beautiful piece of art. And that card is actually pretty busted. And then we've got a kind of a dueling banjos here, an agreement with both our good friend Steven and our good friend Usman, who love this card. Because there's actually 3 cards on this list that I love the most. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Here's my spoiler. 1, Arwen. 2, Captured by the Lagax. And then 3, Cosmic Rebirth, which Usman and Steven both said are their killer cards. This card is bonkers. We actually brought this to our good friend Sandwich's attention recently after we complained about the life gain in the cube of the Peasant Cube. But this card is so good. Cosmic Rebirth for 1 colorless and a Selesnya. Instant. That's what makes it so great. Choose target permanent card in your graveyard. If it has a mana value 3 or less, you may put it on the battlefield. If you don't, put it onto the battlefield, put it into your hand, gain 3 life. This card is nuts. If you haven't noticed this as a Peasant Curator or you have the space, there's a lot going on with this. And I like the fact that there's an inherent cost. I know it's instant speed, but you must jump the hurdle of the Selesnya to get the benefit. Not splashable, if you would, right? Do you agree with that? I like these type cards.
I love these type cards. It's 3 mana, and it's basically Ewit, although not on a stick. But you can also put it on the battlefield if it's CMC 3 or less, and you've got some life gain. What is not to like about doing that at instant speed? Is there anything I should dislike about this card? You're muted again. You're still muted.
May you're miming. May you're miming.
You're muted.
Look, I make a lot of noises, so it tends to happen that I just need to like mute, so that way I'm not interrupting your stuff with like me blowing my nose, for example. You're welcome, by the way. But sometimes I forget to unmute because I'm a bit of a goober. All right. Now, anyways, what I was trying to say, desperately miming into the abyss.
There was a lot of like facial expressions happening for the audience, passion, anger into the mic, and we're like, wow, she's really good at this, like lyrical dancing.
I was actually really excited because this is the type of card that I want to run in a cube along with like Renegade Railer, right?
Hell
like
yeah.
having those two and having like surprise, we have a Selesnya reanimator package. It's just incredibly funny to me, and I'm here for it.
Do you know what the janitor said whenever you opened the closet door and he jumped out?
I don't know.
Supplies.
And here I thought he was going to say he's gay. Hey yo.
Everybody, it has been really nice working with Anthony these last 3 years. This is the last episode. Anyway, let's move over to Chris Fitz. I don't want to say this is my favorite one, but it might, as far as Selesnya cards, but it might be my favorite one on this show that we're going to talk about. So, Chris Fitz, thank you so much for your submission. Chris's choice is Baseball Bat. This is 1 green, 1 white for an artifact equipment. When Baseball Bat enters, attach it to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Whenever equipped creature attacks, tap up to 1 target creature. Equip 3. I love cards that provide a boost, a swing, a surprise out of nowhere, just something that can be a game changer in an environment where I'm either looking at something as being a major problem on the turn that it comes down, or I'm just looking at those tension pieces. It's like, oh, what did you think? You thought that you were going to get to block my creature? You thought, like, no. You don't get to do that. What do you mean you're leaving things up?
When I saw this card, I immediately equated it to Lucille, and I pictured Negan and the Glen, and I can't ever unsee that. So I'm like, baseball bat.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
You've just broken a golden rule.
It was rough.
That's a golden rule. You never bring up that episode.
No one talks about that episode.
No one talks about Glenn.
So when it comes to some of my favorite Selesnya cards, I actually really enjoy some of the more classic limited experience, like Fleecebane Lion, where it is a green and a white for a 3/3. It has Monstrosity 1 for 3 green white. But so long as it's monstrous, it gets hexproof indestructible. I love it because its floor is just, yes, here's my dumb stompy vanilla creature, and then later I can dump mana into it to be like, hey, this thing is now stuck. You're stuck with this thing. Deal with it. And I love cards that do that. I also wanted to give a short little call out for my unsung hero, Dryad Militant.
Yes.
Militant? Whatever. Point is that it's 1 Selesnya, like exactly 1 mana for a 2/1, but it has if an instant and sorcery would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead, which for a lot of environments can just mean, I'm shutting down some of this miscellaneous things. Like, I don't think that belongs in environments that, like, particularly punish graveyard things, like, but if you were looking for kind of like, I'm looking for good 2/1s that have like real good effects, this is easily one of the better ones that people tend to look over. So I just wanted to give a quick little shout out.
Does Dryad Militant, and I'm asking Stu this, have game again in a powered vintage cube with all of the broken recursion and whatnot?
I think it does. The problem for me is because it's a little sideboard limited, I kind of feel like it's great against decks that are really graveyard heavy synergy, but it's not particularly great otherwise.
Does it hurt like the storm combos and the brain freeze combos that we're seeing nowadays where they're kind of looping them?
It can 100%.
Yeah.
I played, this was a 4-of back in the day in my mono green modern Stumpy deck, and it absolutely hosed some decks. Like, I would play games against people and they'd be like, they'd see out and they wouldn't, it wasn't a common card back then, but it's a 2/1 for only 1 mana. So obviously back in the day, anything that was undercosted with that extra power was very powerful for a Stumpy deck, right? This was 10, 12, probably more than that, 15 plus years ago. So the fact that that had that ability tacked on top of it was what was made it so very strong. And there were some decks, like I say, that it just completely hosed. I had games that I played, I put that on turn 1, and someone would try and go off, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, I forgot you had Dried Militant, and they would just scoop instantly. Like, I played a lot on Modo, and it would just be right-click, concede, done. So, yes, I think you're not wrong. Can it have some game in vintage environments? Maybe, but it's just too sideboardy for me to think that it can be realistically included in a good list. I wouldn't include it in mine.
I run it in my travel cube. This is not a vintage list.
Oh, no.
That I run it in.
I've played that cube.
Oh, yes. This is a 2-1 that makes it, you're going to cycle one of your instants and sources that are no longer relevant? Gone. You aren't getting it back. And that particular interaction was why I particularly love it there. And for a lot of low-power environments, this is a 2-1 with upside, and I'm here for it.
Because you think, back when I was playing that, right, Snapcaster Mage was one of the more powerful cards in Modern. So, rip your Snapcaster, you've just got a 2-1 for 2, and I've got a 2-1 for 1. What's the better card now?
So, I kind of want to tie this off, is that, on the surface, sometimes Selesnya can be underappreciated for what sometimes it can represent. Tokens, go wide, lots of counters on the board. It can have the vibes of, I don't know, a little bit of autonomy, a little bit, it's playing itself, but with a little bit of creativity and a lot of curation, you can actually find cards that'll, I guess, kind of hone it in, bring it in, and they're nice top ends, like Arwen the Mortal Queen, right? We talked about her Cosmic Rebirth, or even Baseball Bat.
I just think, again,
these cards have game.
Yeah, they do. The only problem that I have, and I think we kept going back to this, is it still represents tokens and counters. And I think that's not just a me problem. That's something that I've heard other curators and other people talk about, is that making Selesnya great oftentimes revolves around such a predefined set of archetypes that doing other things that are interesting with Selesnya becomes more of a challenge, especially the more powerful you want your cube to be.
I would agree with that 100%. I think May actually tied it off the best. You said it was the best at being fair. I mean, it is. It's like, pulls off fair really well.
To add a little bit of clarification, because I know that somebody's already been thinking it, they're furiously typing you an email.
They're losing their minds in the comments, yes. I will get those emails.
How dare you mention the fact
Please
that
send them to May.
Magic, and it has combos in it, and it's like, yes, Selesnya is really good at doing, like, persist combos, right? But, like, at the end of the day, a majority of the cards are doing the best fair things, right? And yes, while combos exist, they're beautiful. I love the fact that Selesnya combos exist. A lot of the fun with it is the fact that, we have a bunch of good cards, and I think that that's a great tie-off.
Yeah. She always
love it.
Mic drops every time.
Every time.
All right, let's go ahead and take us to the social, Stews.
Thank you. All right. As always, a huge shout out to all of our Patreons, to Patrick, to Jeff, to Nick Lapointe, to Chris Fitzgerald, Timber Dragon, Brian Keaton, Lord Justice, Nick Lapointe, Preston, and Sam McKenna. Huge shout out and a big thanks to all of you guys for supporting the show and helping us keep the lights on here at UberCube.
If you love the cards that we talked about,
and
we are,
again, with CubeCon coming up, right? And you know that there's going to be UberCube representation at CubeCon
at least
2025. You're
3.
going to need to order some cards for that shiny cube, especially if you've got it featured. Use our TCG affiliate link. It's in the show notes. And of course, those Power 9, that you've got to have them for your cube. All right, go get your Lotuses, go get your Marks, your Time Twisters, your Library of Alexandrias, your Tabernacles. Use that link.
I am going to take a moment to actually address something, though, that I am aware of, that TCG is closing their Syracuse location and moving to Kentucky.
They are.
And this is a big deal.
It is.
And there's a lot of speculation, a lot of reasons.
Well, do we want to talk about union busting?
Yeah, we try not to intertwine ourselves into that a great
That's
deal.
That's just me personally.
Yeah, we think about it too. So
okay.
we're not blind to that when we say these things. So, but it is.
We'll see how much we continue to to support that.
We do think about it.
Anyway, for now, we'll see what comes of that. But yeah, big sadness for all those.
Might be tariffs, might not be.
It might be.
We don't know.
We'll see. We don't know, but
we're not in the board.
For right now, we'll see. If you want to get in on the conversation, go to the facebook.com/groups/MTG Cube drafting page. A lot of fun conversation. A lot of members over there talking about Cube. And if you want to support the show, you can also use our inkedgaming.com/ubercube affiliate link. Go and get all kinds of cool products, playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, custom and large volume
Stuff and things.
Stuff and things. If you want to reach us at the socials, you can find us on Bluesky, ubercubemtgpodcast.bsky.social. You can also find us at Twitter at ubercubemtgpod. If you got a longer question or comment about this episode or anything else with the podcast, or about one of Ubercube's,
many things. We're over 1,100 as far as the
cubes.
Facebook goes.
An Uber Bears cube.
A
maze cube.
The Uber Maze.
Uber Bears cube,
Yep.
You can reach us at ubercubemtgpodcast@gmail.com. As always, come hang out on the Discord and patreon.com/ubercube. Again, a big thanks to all of our Patreons. And for last but not least, we do host our content on YouTube at Ubercube MTG Podcast 747. If you just, feel like an alternative format, there you go.
And then one last note. If you know somebody that says that Selesnya is the greatest pairing of Magic, just give them a hug. And then say the thing that we always say here
because
at
they
Ubercube.
need it.
Happy cubing. And for that, May Unmuted.